Adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing decimals with positives and negatives was so much fun. But this is where the real fun comes in, because teachers know you guys love fractions. Fractions are awesome. They're fun and fantastic. And okay, obviously there's some sarcasm here. With fractions, we know that these are the things that cause great difficulty among students. We know that you avoid them. We know that you randomly guess when you are solving these problems. We are aware of this. And so hopefully we can get you through this and these 4 operations with positive and negative fractions as quick and as painless as possible. The important thing when you are dealing with fractions, specifically for adding, is that you've got to have that common denominator. Okay? Now, in the past, you've been told it must be the least common denominator, and if you can identify the least common denominator, awesome. But there are going to be times where you can't, or if you are not good at fractions, then getting the least common denominator can be really stressful. My recommendation to y'all is just multiply the denominators. That's going to be the quickest way. Then whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top, and then follow the rules for integers. If the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. If the signs are different, you subtract, take the sign of the larger absolute value. Denominator stays the same. And then if you need to, you simplify. So in regards to this first problem, 2/5 plus 3/8, we need a common denominator. So you may not know off the top of your head a common denominator for 5 and 8. Quickest way to get one is just multiply your denominators. 5 times 8 and 8 times 5. What we multiply the bottom by, you're going to multiply the top by. 5 times 8, so then we multiply 2 times 8. We multiplied 8 by 5, so we're going to multiply 3 by 5. 2 times 8 is 16, and 5 times 8 is 40. 3 times 5 is 15, and 8 times 5 is 40. Now that we have common denominators, let's follow the rules of the integers. But remember, again, the rules for the integers are only for the numerators. Denominator stays the same. So in this case, we have the same signs. So therefore, the signs are the same. We're going to add 16 plus 15, which is going to give us 31. And our denominator stays the same over 40. Now, to determine if it's going to be a positive or a negative, we look and we say the signs are the same, so we add it and we keep the sign. In this case, both fractions were positive, therefore our answer is positive. Now let's take a look at the second one. 4/9 plus negative 1/6. Now let me address a couple of things before we go on the common denominator part. With that negative, first of all, there's an example of why we put those parentheses in, because it can look really strange to us to see that that's a negative and that's not part of the fraction bar. But also, where does that negative go? When I rewrote the problem, notice where I put the negative, I put it on the numerator. I put it on the 1. When you have a negative with the fraction and you're doing an operation with it, or you're working with it, assign that negative to the numerator. Negatives, can they go with the denominator? Sure. But when it comes to adding and subtracting and all that stuff, it's just a lot easier if you put it with the numerator. So now we need a common denominator. You may look at this and go, hey, I can see that 9 and 6 common denominator, the smallest number that goes into both of them, is 18, or that both of them go into, it's 18. But if you didn't notice that, you can multiply 9 times 6 and 6 times 9. Since we multiplied 9 by 6, you're going to multiply 4 by 6. Since you multiplied 6 by 9, we're multiplying negative 1 by 9. Now we go through and do the multiplications. 4 times 6 is 24, over 9 times 6 is 54, plus negative 1 times 9. Signs are different. Answer is going to be negative 9 over 6 times 9, which is 54. Now we go through the process of following the integer rules. 24 plus negative 9. Our signs are the same, so we have to, our signs are different, so we know we're going to have to subtract. And we get 24 minus 9, which is 15 over 54. Now we have to simplify this fraction because we are asked to simplify. And my advice for simplifying fractions are checking 3 numbers, 2, 3, and 5. While there are going to be instances where larger numbers will work, where like 4 or 6 or 9 or 10 will work, those ones don't work every time, and a lot of times there might be a number that 5 would work, but 10 won't. There will be times that both will work, but sometimes that's going to only work sometimes. If you check 2, 3, and 5, this will work for the majority of the fractions you're going to be simplifying. The only time is going to be if you're asked to simplify, or if you have to simplify fractions by 7. That one's just not a fun one to do, so you don't run into it very often. It can be a little more challenging because it's having to know your 7 times tables. So it's just easier if we check 2, 3, and 5. Now, if we check, does 2 go in, can we simplify by 2? We say, does 2 go into 15 and 54? Well, we know the answer is no because 2 doesn't go into 15. We say, does 5 go into 15 and 54? We know the answer is going to be no because 5 doesn't go into 54. But we can check 3 if it goes into 15 and 54 by saying, what's 1 plus 5 for 15? We know that to be 6. And what's 5 plus 4 for 54? We know that to be 9. Can 3 go into 6 and 9? The answer is yes. This means that 3 will go into 15 and 54. 3 goes into 15 5 times, and 3 goes into 54 18 times. Therefore, we end up with the answer 5/18. And we knew it was going to be a positive answer because the 24 is larger than the 9, meaning the 4/9 is larger than the 1/6, and the 4/9 is positive. So therefore, our final answer is positive.